Good morning, everyone. I think I know most of you. There's some new faces, so that's good. I might be preaching to the choir on this side of the room, but that's still okay.
I'll be part of the choir.
So basically, Presque State Park has been involved with some sort of invasive species control since the 1990s. This is a very important park, which we'll get into later, but in the 1990s, basically who was doing the work, there were a couple interns who were paid by the Presque Partnership, and they were walking down the median and using hand tools to clip plants. So you can guess that didn't get very far. So it was pretty quickly understood that we had to do a whole lot more in the battle against the invasive plants, especially because some of the ones that we have here are so prolific and they take over so readily that we really needed to do something. So why is Presque State Park important? Why is it important to do this work here? There's several reasons. The first is that we are the only beach in Pennsylvania. We are a recurving sand spit that sticks out into the lake, made up of sand, obviously. We have engineered that over the years, so it is not moving down the shoreline, but technically it should be kind of bouncing off, slinking its way down the shoreline, but we're keeping it here to maintain it as a state park. Since we have this beachy habitat, that's not found anywhere else in Pennsylvania, so many of the plants and animals that live in this habitat are rare, threatened, or endangered within the state, if not federally, because there's just that limited resource available and that limited habitat. So we do also have all of the successional stages on this park. We go from the new beach, the brand new beach, all the way up to the climax forest, so we have the species that live in all those habitats and everything in between. We're also located on a Great Lake. We're located where there are migration paths. So many different bird species are coming through this area. We identify at least 340 species coming through the park on an annual basis. We also are on migration paths for monarchs, things like that, lots of insects coming through. We also are identified because we have many species of special concern. We have piping plovers, we have common terns, we have a lot of species that are not found other places. And that's just not birds. We also have plants and fish and turtles. So any time that we do a project on the park, we pretty much have to do what's called a PNDI, and we have to have everything researched and checked out. Every agency within Pennsylvania has a flag pop up because we have something special to them. So whether we have a special plant or a special amphibian, reptile, fish, bird species visiting the area, all of them have to check off that we will do no harm to those species before we can move forward with what we're doing. So it's pretty crazy that way. We're also identified as an important bird area because of all the species that visit or live here. And we're also identified as a national natural landmark because we're so special. This just doesn't exist anywhere else. And the bottom one is, I put it last, but we see about 4 million visitors a year. So you take all the top, those are like all the resource things, and then, oh, by the way, 4 million visitors a year. And the majority of those visitors are coming during the 100 days of summer, so Memorial Day to Labor Day. So we're pretty heavily used, and this is our total acreage, 3,200 acres. So we have a small footprint, a lot of visitors, and we're really important. So that's why it's important to manage for these invasives. So these are some of the special species we were talking about. Some of them will be very familiar to you. Some of them you're gonna be like, I've never seen that before. Obviously the bald eagle. Historically, bald eagles were nesting here back in the 50s. We then lost those nests. And starting about 4 years ago, we had successful bald eagle nesting back on the park. So that's a success story we can tell. The nesting locations are very close to our treatment locations. So we're gonna take that as a win because there has to be some sort of correlation there. We also have osprey nesting on the park. They have never nested on the park before. Back in the 90s, a couple of our birding organizations put up some hacking towers to try to encourage them to nest here. They were never used. We actually had a conversation about 5 years ago about removing those hacking towers, and then boom, osprey showed up and started nesting. So they're here, which is awesome. We have a plant called the hairy puccoon or hoary puccoon, however you want to identify it. That is located in a big sandplain area across from the lighthouse, so we maintain for that species. We also have these little guys, least bitters. They're kind of a sneaky little marsh bird that's found in most of our waterways, interior lagoon areas. So this is a little tricky. You'll hear the Area Bird Observatory probably talk about these birds as well because they're looking for them. We can say that we are seeing more of them since we started this project, but we're also looking for them. So it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, we're not sure. But either way, we'll take it as a win because they're still here and they're still here in high numbers. We also have lupine, which is this tall kind of spiked purple flower. That's, I'm sorry, I'm lying. Yeah, I'm not lying. So that's located in several locations in the park. Not a lot in our major treatment areas, but we will push back invasives from these areas to make sure that they're open, sandy plains for those to grow. We also have common terns. So these bird species historically nested and had a colony at Presque, mostly out near Gull Point. They have to have a colony in order to nest and breed successfully because they're very open to predation. Any shorebird putting nest on the ground is going to be open to predation. So they have nested here, they have laid eggs here, but there's only like 5 to 8 species, 5 to 8 individuals of the species. So they don't have enough to make a colony to protect themselves. So they have not been successful yet because their numbers are so low, but we're seeing increases every year, so we're hoping that that's going to be a trend that continues. We also have this little guy. This is a Blanding's turtle, and we are the only place it's found in Pennsylvania. Weird. So there's some other historic locations in Pennsylvania, south of here, but Fish and Boat has been unable to locate them in those spots. So they found about 2 different individuals. Mark can correct me if I'm wrong because he knows more about this, but when they found the individuals, they found a male and a female, which is, yay, good, that's good. But they put some trackers on them. They were hoping to find where they were nesting, if they were breeding on the park. The trackers, of course, fell off right before they would have got to the nesting location. So they're not positive yet if they are reproducing on the park. But we're in talks with Fish and Boat to possibly add more of those animals to this park since we have the habitat for them. And then we also have piping plovers. So you've, I'm sure, heard about these in the paper. There's a Great Lakes population of piping plovers. Historically, they did nest on Presque Isle. Starting about 3 years ago, we got them back. They would always kind of flip by and visit on their way across the Great Lakes. But now we actually have a nesting pair. They've been here for 3 seasons and have had successful nests. So that's a big win on maintaining the resource out there for them. So some of the main invasive species targets. In the springtime, we're pretty much pulling garlic mustard. This is a plant that pretty much pulls out pretty easy. A lot of volunteer help with this, pulling those out of the ground. Honeysuckle, so this one people always ask me about. If you look at our park, pretty much most of our understory is honeysuckle. The good and bad with honeysuckle is that it is a great cover plant. It's great, insects love it, ticks love it, by the way. But a lot of birds, all of our little rodents, bunnies, everything loves to hide in that. So it's a great cover, it's a great habitat for a lot of species. So we're a little leery here of just like ripping it all out or killing it all because that's providing there's a good reason for it to be here, even though it's invasive. Where we can, we identify locations where we can plant natives in its place, and then we'll remove those in those areas. Or if we identify an area where we want to clear it out altogether and have an open spot, then that's something we'll do. But we're not really going to go in and just rip and tear all the honeysuckle out of the park. And people always ask me about that. They're like, that's invasive, why don't you? I'm like, do you want it to look like that? Because this is green and it's serving a purpose. We also have a pretty big issue with Oriental bittersweet. Most people don't even realize it's there, but along the median as you're driving into the park, all the way to the administrative building, as well as the whole back side of Beach 6 behind the volleyball courts, it's pretty much all Oriental bittersweet growing up vines up into the trees. We use volunteers to assist us with this. Basically all they're doing is cutting it. So they're cutting a window, that's the safest way to treat it. You don't want to pull a vine down from over your head because it's going to definitely pull something down onto you. So they're doing that work. And interns then follow them and spray with herbicide the new growth that's coming up. But this is going to be a pretty good battle because each one of these little seed pods holds hundreds of seeds that can at any time just sprout back up. 400?
No, 4 seeds.
Oh. It seems like a million when you're trying to deal with this because each one of these little pods, I mean, it's nuts. We also have a small population of knotweed, several just different sparse locations throughout the park. This you treat by cutting, and spraying at the end of the season, so we manage that way. It's not a huge deal, but if you drive down the hill to the park, on both sides of the road, you'll see that it is just all knotweed. So it's coming. These are the two biggest targets we have, especially with this grant, because they are in the wetland areas. We have narrow-leaved cattail and Phragmites. So the narrow-leaved cattail, we pretty much use the rule of thumb, for real. And basically, the leaf of the narrow-leaved cattail is going to be narrower than your thumb. If it's wider than your thumb, chances are it might be a native. So we do have native cattail on the park, very few and far between. The difference is a native cattail will grow in patches, narrow-leaved cattail goes like crazy. And this can also hybridize with the native and make the hybrid cattail, which is like a little bit wider than the narrow-leaf, but not as wide as the native. So we're always looking for that and treating it when we find it. Phragmites is that tall plumy grass that you see everywhere along the park. We're having really good success kind of wiping this out where we can get to it. So that's really good. This plant will create a monoculture. It's actually allelopathic, so it sends poison down into the earth, prevents any other plants from growing around it, and will make sure that it is putting its foothold there, and that's how it grows. It spreads by seeds and rhizomes, so it really takes over an area if you let it go. We have purple loosestrife. Up until this past year, we had just kind of some patchy purple loosestrife. This year, I think it must be the high water level. It went bananas. So we have more purple loosestrife on this park than I've ever seen, and I've been here for about 12 years. So we're working on trying to get rid of that. Back in the 90s, they did release a beetle that helps to predate this plant, and we just had a phone call this week that we're probably going to get more of those beetles to put them into some more of our populations. This one, it's unfortunate that this is invasive because I think it's so cute, but this is a flowering rush, and this is located in the wetland areas along with the narrow-leaved cattail and Phragmites. Once again, this plant has really taken off, I think with high water levels as well. Pretty much anywhere where it used to be grass and the water has overtopped those banks, it's lined with flowering rush. So this is another target that we treat. Finally, ailanthus is something that we have had a couple individual species in the main area of the park. We found ailanthus island this summer in the lagoon area, so we treated all of those plants. But this is something we want to make sure we don't have here. It's a big issue in eastern PA, southeastern PA. This is the main host plant for the spotted lanternfly, which is coming, sorry, but it's probably coming. And that insect does major issues to food crops and things like that. So we want to make sure that we get rid of those host plants before, just to be a little proactive. So how we use our management practices here, we do follow best management practices. The idea here is to protect the best habitats. So where we have those special species, we want to push back any invasive plants from those areas and make sure they're open for those plants to grow. We want to push back the invasive edge. We want to encourage the native plants to fill in. When the native plants fill in, like reeds and sedges and all those different great natives do come back, they do fill in. They're alive and well in the seed bank. We just have to get the invasives out of the way. And when they pop back up, they really do serve a purpose to keep those invasives out of there. And everyone likes this picture, so we think of it here as just peeling back the layers, especially when we're treating in the lagoon area. We're spraying from a boat, so you can only get what you can reach. And we're kind of doing it one layer at a time, so the next year we go back and you can see, hey, there's the dead stuff we treated 2 years ago, there's the dying stuff we treated last year, now we can spray the next layer. So we're just treating it like an onion and peeling back the layers. We do a lot of different treatment methods here at the park, starting with as simple as this is a cotton glove. So we'll wear nitrile gloves covered with a cotton glove, spray herbicide on the cotton glove, run it up the stalk of the plant, making sure to touch all the leaves. This method is called glove of death. And we use that treatment in areas where we have a lot of good plants coming up and we don't want to damage them. So we're specific to just get our targets. We also can use backpack tank sprayers. So this is those folks in there. That's also for a pretty localized, you're going after individual plants. You don't want to have overspray, you're working real close. Then we do some pretty large scale things. These are two of our boats. We have an airboat as well as this is a large pontoon boat. And we put large tank sprayers on there. They have a nozzle sprayer that's just like your garden hose. And we can get a whole lot of coverage on a lot of monocultures. So you see this is all frag here. This is all cattail in front of this boat. This is when people hop off the boat and drag about 100 feet of hose back into these crazy monocultures. They'll just kind of go in, spray over top of their head, go into another one. So they're getting a lot of good coverage that way, but we use those tools when we know that we're not going to injure any other good plants around there. And then the last one, probably and the craziest, is we have had a helicopter twice in history come to this park and spray from the air a lot of large patches of invasive plants. So they sprayed in 2012 and did about 240 acres, and then they just sprayed this past fall, just a few weeks ago here, and they got about 150 acres. So those were the areas that they sprayed that we couldn't get to any other way. So this is the story we can tell about the resource management work. This is just 2019. So there's two different numbers here. The area treated is 90 acres. If you look at this map, all of the red is where we were either on the ground working or had a boat spraying. And this is just herbicide treatments. So we were on the ground trying to find plants in all these areas. Of that area, that was 363 acres. So we were walking, we're riding a boat on 363 acres. We only applied chemical herbicide to 90 acres, okay? So this is a good story. We are protecting and monitoring and making sure those plants aren't on 363 acres and only finding them on 90 acres and treating them. So that's a big tipping point, because when I did this presentation in 2009, this was like, we treated 300 acres and we protected 300 acres. So this is a good story that we're walking a whole lot more than we're applying chemical. And then this is where the helicopter treated in this pink, and they did a little spot at Leo's Landing. And it's interesting, if you overlay this onto this, you can see that these are the areas that we were unable to get to. So definitely that's working out for us that way. The helicopter can get to areas that we're not able to get to. So this is my favorite slide, #winning. So basically, this is one of our colleagues' interns. You may see this picture again, because we all love it. So this is this person standing along the roadside, the pond that's across from Thompson Circle. It used to not be a pond, it used to be this standing monoculture of Phragmites. And this is what it looks like today. So this can work. This is, this looked like this. This area was treated with a helicopter in 2009. Maintenance went in there when it was frozen and just ran it all down with equipment. Then every year since then, interns make like a chain of people and walk through this and treat any new invasives that are popping up. So it's a never-ending battle, but it can work as long as you're diligent, stay up with it. So basically, Jeanette mentioned some of the partners, but we do all this work through grant funding. If we did not have grant funding, it wouldn't happen. We use the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. Currently, we're using Sustain Our Great Lakes funding. We'll use any grant we can get. So that's currently the fund. Ducks Unlimited, as Jeanette mentioned, is the administrator of the money, so he makes sure that we all spend accordingly and we're all doing what we're supposed to do and what we said we were going to do in the grant. We're all meeting our benchmarks. We also work with Regional Science Consortium, California, University of Pennsylvania. They do all the monitoring of all this stuff. You'll be hearing from some of them. Go Native Area, you'll also hear from Jen. She helps us by propagating natives and reestablishing areas where we're removing invasives. Erie Bird Observatory, we'll also talk about some of those sneaky little marsh birds. And Environment Erie assists us by providing volunteer weed warriors who work on things that we are not able to do. So, does anyone have any questions for me about stuff that's going on?